Howdy, folks. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am your host, the Mighty Bjorn, and today for you, I have a brand new Warhammer 40k Horus Heresy video. I'm going to be talking about a bit about an article I was recently reading about the Horus Heresy TTRPG that's going to be coming up, and it mostly has to pertain with an interview from some of the folks over there at Cubicle 7, and they were discussing about the Horus Heresy TTRPG. And I will try to remember to keep a link in the video description, but I may forget it because, yeah, I'm old and shit and do things like that. With that being said, I've also been meaning to actually get this video out a bit sooner, but I've also been kind of busy with various other things, especially because my son just had his birthday and I got him Space Marine 2. So him and I have been actually playing quite a bit of Space Marine 2 recently. Now, folks, really quick before I get into it, I just want to take a moment and thank you, the viewership out there, for support, the likes, the comments, subscriptions, the shares. That all helps me out, bumps me up in the YouTube algorithm. I really appreciate it. Also, the Patreon support I am very grateful for. So I just want to give a special shout out and a special thank you to my Patreon supporters and for anyone who would be interested in providing additional support to the channel. That's actually a good way to do so. There's a link down below in the video description. But let's get more on to the Horus Heresy. Now, the main thing that they primarily talked about was playing as a Space Marine console, which is, this is something I've hinted to in my previous video, is one thing you're going to be doing was playing the part of a Space Marine console. And pretty much what it translates to is you're an advisor, you're pretty much an officer within a Space Marine Legion. Now, with that being said, they've hinted to the fact that it's only going to be loyalist legions to start with. And that the traitor legions were going to be off limits to begin with, but they also hinted as future supplements, as the war expands and things of that nature, that they will open up opportunities for people to play as traitor legions. Now, one thing they have hinted to is the equipment as a Space Marine console. They've pretty much said anything, just about everything that you see within the tabletop miniature game of Horus Heresy will be available to you as a Space Marine console player. So basically all kinds of cool stuff, various different types of bolters, power weapons, so on and so forth. They even made hints of Terminator armor being available to you and your other players within your campaign. And I do believe I did see something about jet bikes even being available. So that's going to be pretty cool because essentially the use of jet bikes within the Imperium kind of ended with the Horus Heresy. So it's going to be kind of cool that they're going to be there as a prominent part of the Horus Heresy, is having jet bikes. Another thing they discussed too was, as being part of a Space Marine console, you're going to be part of, well, more or less a strategic campaign. It's a war. And you're going to be looking at both naval assets, space navy, and space naval combat, as well as leading Space Marines into battle during land-based combat. And a part of even what they hinted to was singles combat, which I would think possibly in the future this could lead to player versus player combat, as some players may decide to stay loyal to the Space Marines and the Emperor, while others may decide to become traitors. So this probably could lead to player versus player combat even within the Horus Heresy TTRPG. And singles combat is actually kind of an important part of the Horus Heresy as a whole. Now, another thing that they discussed a bit too was actually the Imperial Specialist. This was one thing that I really didn't have too much information on to go on of what they meant by Imperial Specialist, but they haven't really given a ton of information, but they've hinted more to what being the Imperial Specialist would be. This would be your secondary character. And essentially they talked about basically Imperial Navy officers, maybe Imperial Army troops. Basically, it's gonna come down to you're playing as humans, straight up humans, no genetic, you know, alterations or anything of that nature. You're not playing as Space Marines. You're going to be humans, and essentially, it's kind of the standpoint of seeing the Horus Heresy through the eyes of basically an Imperial soldier. In my opinion, I think that leads us to being able to actually play Imperial specialist and exploring different parts of the war from different angles at different points of time. Maybe some characters are in one part of the galaxy while other characters are in another part of the galaxy. And in my opinion, I think this is more where the story driven assets is going to actually be, because you're essentially trying to react to what is happening. And you're kind of viewing, for lack of a better term, essentially you're viewing the Emperor's angels, gods, if you will, going to war with one another, especially when it comes to the Primarchs. And the interesting thing I think about playing as the Imperial Specialist is going to be dealing with certain aspects of the Civil War between the various Space Marine chapters. Sorry, not chapters, legions. So used to saying Space Marine chapter. That there'll be certain aspects that, as the Imperial Specialist, you're going to see of the war that you just won't see essentially as the Space Marine, or you'll see it as the Space Marine, but it's more background noise, where with the Imperial Specialists, such as dealing with refugees, it's going to be more prominent and more forward, if you will. As well as just the aspect of being a regular human being, essentially trying to fight against super soldiers. So I think that could be actually interesting. Honestly, with what I was seeing, even though there wasn't a lot given, it just seemed like a more interesting aspect of play than actually even playing as the Space Marine itself. Now, one thing that they also hinted to, or another thing, if you will, was also logistics was going to be a very important part of the game, because it is a more strategic TTRPG. So logistics is going to be a part of the forefront. I actually greatly appreciate that, because the fact is a lot of times wars comes up within a TTRPG, and the logistics of a campaign doesn't necessarily become part of the forefront. And they even hinted to this whole thing about launching a risky operation, maybe a risky rescue operation. When you only have one Thunderhawk gunship available, do you decide to actually launch that operation or not? Because if you lose that Thunderhawk, well, you might be in a bit of hot water. So I think that's kind of cool in itself. The next thing that they did mention during the interview as well is that it is going to be a D10 dice pool system. And the creators, the people over at Cubicle 7 that's working on the Horus Heresy TTRPG, feels that it keeps the rules a bit simpler, and it makes the game a bit more accessible to people. I'm kind of mixed on that one in myself. Rules for dice pool systems can be a little bit simpler. With that being said, though, using D10s over like a D6 dice pool system, I think that kind of makes things a little less accessible than they believe it's going to be. And that's something I can really dive into, but I'm not going to here. I mean, honestly, for me, a D10 dice pool system, well, guys, you know, I'm a D&D player and I'm a filthy dice goblin, so I probably got, you know, like 20 D10 right now without even thinking about it. Anyway, we'll move on to the next part. But one thing that they compared it to, the dice pool system, the D10 dice pool system, is they compared it to Warhammer the Old World. Now, honestly, for me, I don't really know Warhammer the Old World. I haven't tried it. I don't even know if the books are actually available yet. I know that there is stuff being developed for it, which they did mention that as well. But I mean, you know, it's a dice pool system, and probably most of us who's watching this video already is familiar with one of their dice pool games, and that's probably going to be Warhammer 40k Wrath and Glory, which kind of feels like might be their flagship system. I don't really know per se. I've never like asked them, hey, what's your big game? But also with that being said, about Warhammer 40K Wrath and Glory, there was actually a product update video recently that was put out by one of the guys over at Cubicle 7, and they discussed various stuff that they were working on, and I did actually ask the question about Warhammer 40K Wrath and Glory, and that's because I'm a big Warhammer 40K Wrath and Glory guy. I'm pretty sure it's obvious from my YouTube channel if you go looking through my playlists that I have a full playlist dedicated to just Warhammer 40K Wrath and Glory. So I was definitely very curious of, with there being multiple 40K systems, which there are going to be 3 different systems that they're doing development for, because you have Wrath and Glory, Imperial Maledictum, and now you're going to have the Horus Heresy TTRPG, as well as they actually have the rights, or I'm not sure how it works, but they also sell the second edition of Dark Heresy. It made me curious about, hey, what's going to happen to Warhammer 40K Wrath and Glory? Well, Cubicle 7 gave me an answer right there. So anyway, folks, that's all I got for you today when it comes to the Horus Heresy TTRPG. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for tuning in, and have yourselves a wonderful day.